What is OCP routes? So what OCP route is doing, it is exposing the service running inside the OpenShift cluster to outside application or outside world. Okay. So what in OpenShift we have OCP route. OCP route is nothing but ingress, which is in Kubernetes. By default, OpenShift gives the routes. You don't need to configure ingress. Okay. So whatever service means pod application running, that will have a service URL. So how the communication will happen in OpenShift? So basically, you will have a pod. Okay, this pod is nothing but a container. We will call it the pod in OCP. So the pod will have a service endpoint, which is nothing but a service endpoint, and then service endpoint will be exposed to via OCP route. Okay, why we need a service endpoint basically? So that the pod can be one pod or pod can be many pod. Okay, it can be many pod. So where say we have multiple microservices. So these are service one, and we have a service two. Then service 1 to service 2, the call will go from OCP service. So what happens if there's a pod, okay, this is a third pod. If you are connecting this pod using the port and pod to pod, you are communicating, okay. Say this pod is deleted for some reason or crashed, then this communication will break. Say this pod, if we are giving service URL, okay, so each services will have a service URL. So the service URL will be like a domain name. Okay. So this pod will connect to the service URL, and there is something called replicas. There can be more than one pod. So the connection will be made to any pod using the service URL. So most of the internal communication within the OCP cluster will be happening using the service URL. But say there is another application, okay, which wants to connect. Okay, so what we will do, we will use route configuration. Using this route, this application is exposed to the another application externally with the load balancer. Okay, or within the cluster also for another service, you can use OCP route instead of service. You can use OCP route to communicate between one service to another service. So this is how the communication will work. So the OCP service need to map with the DNS host. Okay. So when we configure an OCP service, it will have a DNS host. Say for example, apps.cloudbobby.com. Okay. So now what happens? I create one container. Okay. So this contain or this service, I am deploying on service, say UI service. So what will happen? My endpoint will be ui.apps.cloudhobby.com. So now say when I have a DB, okay. So when I have a DB, one second. Ji. Hello. స్టీమ్ వాషర్ ఎట్లా ఆన్ చేసేది నాకే తెలియదు. నేను డిష్ వాషర్లో స్టీమ్ వాషర్ని ఆన్ చేసింది లేదు. చిమ్లీనా చిమ్నీలు అది నటుగా ఆన్ బటన్ ఒక 2 minutes ప్రెస్ చేసుకునే ఉంటే అలితే అది ఆన్ అయిపోను. అవును. జస్ట్ పవర్ బటన్ని ఒక 2 minutes పవర్ బటన్ నటుగా ఒక బటన్ ఉంది. దాన్ని జస్ట్ ఒక 2 seconds దాన్ని హోల్డ్ చేసుకునే ఉంది. ఓకేనా? ఫోటో ఎత్తి పంచేది. Okay, so what happens is this, and I'm putting another service, which is hello. చెప్పడి ఆ బటన్ లేదే. అదే తోసిపో, నాకు తెలియలేదే. ఆ సైడ్ పో, అన్ని బటన్ తెలియలేదే. స్ట్రీమ్ ఉంది చూడు, దాన్ని ప్రెస్ చేసుకో. స్ట్రీమ్ వాషింగ్ ని ప్రెస్ చేసుకునే ఉండే 2 seconds. తెలియలేదే, నువ్వు వేరెక్కడో పెట్టు. వచ్చేసిన అంతదా. సరే సరే, ఓకే ఓకే, చూడు. Okay, now say I have another service, then that service will have, uh, for example, it can be portal.apps.cloudbobby.com. So each service you are deploying, it will be exposed via this host in the route. So that is why this host entry is required. And what this route is using is OCP route is using is HA proxy. Okay, it is using H in the backend. It use HA proxy router. So HA proxy is the component which is like a ingress. Okay, HA proxy router it is using, and supports TLS termination in 3 methods. So it is TLS is the HTTPS TLS termination, where it has 3 types. One is edge, second is pass through and re-encrypt. Okay, so which is pass through and re-encrypt. Okay, what is edge? So edge is nothing but traffic to pod in HTTP. Okay, so edge is, so when one pod, the traffic will use traffic to pod is our container in HTTP. Okay, so if you use edge, it is HTTP basically. Okay, whereas pass through, it so this again it is router to traffic. Okay, from your router to traffic. Okay, again we have pass through. Pass through is nothing but you have the pod to pod, like your container to pod to pod. So TLS handles between your pod to pod communication also. Pod to pod communication will also become TLS, which means one service to another service. When you are using OCP route, it will use pass through. Re-encrypt means TLS terminated at the router, re-encrypted and sent as TLS to pod. Okay, it is TLS terminated at router end, router, and re-encrypt at pod level. Okay, so these are 3 types when you create it. Okay, so basically, if you are very good at Kubernetes, you will know something as ingress. OCP route does an ingress. It's nothing but native to OpenShift. And in the command line, how we will use is OC route. Okay, OC route. This is the command. OC is OpenShift CLI. Okay, so the OC route is the CLI to, sorry, not OC route, it is OT expose. OC expose is the CLI command which we will use. So this is the way. So when you create a route, you can also create using a YAML file. Okay, so where you will use kind as route. Okay, so and then you will have an app name, and where you will attach to the service and target port. Okay, app name. So that YAML you can refer, it is available. So then you will attach a service because route will attach to the service, and then you can give the target port. Okay, so which target port, 8080 or what target port, and TLS termination. For example, we will use edge. Okay, these are the things you have to know in OCP route to configure in the OpenShift. Okay. So